Hey, good afternoon. Blake Buttram and Matt Minton with Arkansas Retirement and Wealth, and thank you for joining us today. Today, we want to talk about longevity risk, and just more simply put, will your money last? That's we hear that a lot. So we're gonna talk about some topics that kind of address the challenge of outliving your retirement savings. So, I do want to say before we get started that nothing that him or I say is individualized investment advice for you. We're just talking in generalities. So obviously, that's what Matt and I do, is provide recommendations to people. If you have any questions on this, please feel free to call our office and book an appointment, and we'd be more than happy to look over the details of your individual financial plan and provide recommendations there. But we do want to discuss 3 key strategies today. Number 1 being holistic planning, which is just, we don't just look at one particular pot. Several people have different buckets. It's important to look at all of those in a holistic approach together. And then along with that comes a balanced investment approach. And then finally, maintaining your quality of life, which is what some people, they think it's so far down the road, they don't even think about that, but I promise you it's very important. So you want to go ahead and talk about the holistic approach?
Yeah, as Blake kind of mentioned, probably everybody that walks through our front door, the thing that's on their mind is, am I going to outlive my money? Is my money going to last as long as I'm going to last? And really probably 90% of the other details are just derivatives of that question, of that concern. And so from year to year, if we're looking at interest rates or returns on our money, it's not the returns or the interest rates that we're after. It's making sure that we're keeping up with that longevity of, I'm planning on being here 30 years. If I'm making this much money, is that going to sustain me that long? When we have a bad year, losing money hurts, yeah, but the concern is this is eating into the money that I've got to have last the next 30 years, sure. 25 years, 40 years, depending on your retirement. And, today we see people living longer. It seems like every year the life expectancy seems to get a little bit longer. Modern medicine advances and more and more people trying to be health conscious with certain things that, we see more and more people living into their 90s with their retirement.
I met with somebody yesterday, 95 years old, and drove down here from Jonesboro.
Yeah. So often, I don't know if you run into the same thing, but so many of my clients that I run into, when I start talking about age 90 and age 95, and that's my job, is to bring up those ages and plan for those times. I'm going to say probably 80% of the people I talk to go, I'm not going to live that long.
Yeah. Not me.
But you know what? You need to plan for it.
For sure.
You need to plan to live that long, because it might happen.
Yeah, you'd rather plan for it and then that, knock on wood, not be the case, right? Then get there and be like, oh gosh, I wish I would have done this decades ago. But like Matt talking about the holistic approach, we look at a balanced investment approach as well. So whether that means money between, like, for income purposes from your pension that maybe you work for either a company or like a government agency that will provide you a pension, all those are drastically going away. What's the statistic? It's like less than 4% of public companies,
private employees,
private employees have a pension. For instance, Matt and I, we will not have a pension. Matt's wife, Kelly, works for, she's a teacher. She will. So, those pension amounts, or pension offers are just not really out there anymore. So then it relies on yourself to save, for those times whenever you do need money. But then also we have many of our clients that just rely on their investments, to generate the money. So, used to, everybody had this idea that a 4% withdrawal rate, and that was like, historically, it was probably written in books, back in the 80s, that as long as your money made 4% a year, and there's other factors obviously involved, but you wouldn't run out of money. Any modern economist would probably tell you that that withdrawal rate of 4% probably needs to be shrunk a little bit. Who knows what interest rates are going to do. Back before COVID, whenever interest rates were, you struggled to find a CD for a year at 1.5%. Now you can still find them 4 to 5. I had a client the other day told me that they had a 5.5% CD. While those rates are great right now, I don't think that we can rely on that, for the long run. I think it's going to be drastically. I think we may I don't know that we'll ever get back down to where they were. I hope we don't. That would be nice to kind of meet somewhere in the middle. But again, it's just one of those things. I told somebody the other day that I was meeting with the first time, like annuities, for instance. If you ever meet with anybody and you've got $100,000 and they say, yep, you got to put all that $100,000 into an annuity, probably need to get up and run out of the door, just because that doesn't benefit anybody but the person you're speaking with. So, we like to take a balanced approach to it. So multiple buckets, for income purposes, but then also market, how the market plays into that and stuff like that. So
spreading out the asset classes is what it's all about. Ideally you've got guaranteed income streams, Social Security, you've got money in a different bucket that has a different role with longevity and inflation risk with stocks, real estate, bonds. In case if interest rates start to fall, bonds are going to take advantage of that. So having a diversified bucket, having a diversified portfolio with buckets that do different things in different situations for different times is really what it's all about. If you've got a plan for everything that comes along, then you've got a bucket there for it, and then you're less likely to, some things you can't plan for. We look back at in 2000 with the tech wreck and the global meltdown in 2008 and the COVID crisis, everything that happened there. I was just talking to somebody the other day about, the biggest downturns that we've had are things that nobody could have really planned for. They were things that blindsided us.
Yeah.
But that's why we talk so much about having some sort of a foundation that not if, but probably when we get blindsided again at some point, we've got something that we can fall back on and say, hey, at least we've got this over here that didn't lose our shirt.
Yeah, the same client I was mentioning that drove down here from Jonesboro the other day, they have been retired in like their early 50s. So, 35 to 40 years. So think about what they've lived through. I'm not only in the last decade, they've experienced the downfall of COVID. Before that, it was the global financial meltdown. 8 years prior to that, it was what happened, the tech wreck that Matt mentioned, and 9/11. So that's why we always tell people you want to plan for the worst, but then hope for the best, right? You'll never hear us say, "Yep, you're going to achieve this." We always tell people to, we underpromise and the goal is to overdeliver, right? I never want to tell somebody that they're going to average 8, 9, 10% a year because that's what the market's done in the past couple of years, just because that's not sustainable over a long period of time.
Absolutely. So. Yeah, and lastly, the something that's really important that we want to keep in mind is as we're planning for all this is maintaining your quality of life. I always joke about in our workshops when we do those for people that nobody's plan is to work their whole life, save up a nest egg for retirement and then just sit on the front porch and eat ramen for the next 30 years. We've got a way that we like to live, and ideally whenever we quit working, whenever we're not just devoting our life to the man anymore, that becomes the best part of our life, is we can just enjoy ourselves. We don't have to work. We're not going to school like we were when we were younger. We can do whatever we want to do. And so I think it's really important that we have a plan in place where everything is stable enough that regardless of what happens, we're able to make sure that those are the best years of our life. Because, if we're relying strictly on Social Security or we're having to go back to work, to make ends meet, and that's pulling away from quality of life, of retirement, of those years that really should be the very, very best.
Yeah. I mean, I tell people all the time, you retire for a reason. You don't want to retire and then watch your money fall by 20 or 30% and all of a sudden start losing sleep at night and then regret that you made that decision when you did, so something that we talk a lot about with our clients. But then also want to hit on, healthcare risk, inflation risk. That those costs are, the healthcare specifically is just, it's astronomical. My grandmother, which she passed away about a month and a half ago, but her story was a little bit different. But for those of y'all that know me, y'all kind of heard some of this. But she was diagnosed with dementia probably, gosh, I don't know, 10 to 12 years ago, and just steadily her health declined, and we had to bring in help to help her and all that. But it cost nearly $100,000 a year towards the end of her life to provide that care. So what we see a lot is people have saved really well. They never think that they never have that part in the equation about how am I going to pay? If I tell the story all the time, like if my wife, she weighs probably 120 pounds less than I do. So if I had a stroke and fell out on the floor, she might be able to pick me up 1 or 2 times. But repeatedly doing that, the analogy is repeatedly caring for me over many, many years would cause her health to deteriorate as well. We've seen it with clients taking care of their parents that didn't plan for this type of thing. So it's something that we always try to talk to our clients about. As long as they have the funds available to make something happen with it, because it is a huge concern. And then inflation. I mean, everybody knows what inflation has done. What were I-bonds paying? Inflation type savings bond, I mean, like over 9%.
9.62.
Yeah. So, if you look at what interest rates are doing now, that is a direct result of what inflation has done. I guess really like right before COVID and then into COVID. And we could have a whole nother video on the reasons of inflation and what has caused it and all that good stuff, but it's there. Everybody knows how much more things cost now compared to what they did even 5 years ago. Even if we don't have a bird flu crisis and all this junk that's going on in the world, just go buy a vehicle. The same truck that I bought 5 years ago would now be about $15,000 to $18,000 more now compared to back then. Same exact truck. So you have to be able to account for all of that in your plan. So again, planning is very, it's critical. And some people, there's a saying out there that most people spend more time planning their yearly vacation than they do for retirement. Scary to think about, but it's true.
Well, and ideally, you're talking about inflation, there's an asset class for that.
Yeah. So, well, anyway, we appreciate you joining us today. We'll do one of these again next week. So as we always say, if you have any topics you want us to talk about, please, give us a shout. We are going to be having some educational events come up. I know we've got one out at National Park College in the next few weeks. If you would like to attend that, I'm going to be doing the one around lunchtime. Matt will be doing that in the evening, but we're going to be talking about taxes in retirement, which again, a whole nother topic for a whole nother day. But would love for you to see that and hear about it. So just call the office and we'll get your name on the list. And anyway, we appreciate you joining us. Thank you.